Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Game Plan. This is all about the Seattle Seahawks versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Big game for both teams. Closer than you might think it would be based on the record or their records. If you're new to this show, here's what I do. I quickly run through the injuries. I quickly run through the key stats and the key analytics, which I sometimes refer to as gamblers or bettors stats. We use that combined with my fantasy football analytics, and I will give you the fantasy football projections as well to predict the game plan and the path to victory for both teams. This is pure analysis for this game. Before we get rolling here, as I always say, please, for 2 seconds of your time, for 2 clicks, a like and a subscribe. We're very close to unlocking some of our things. We need your support to do that. We want to unlock some interactive features on these videos to make them better. Once again, a like and a subscribe would really help us out. But let's dig in as I always do. We'll start with the key injuries for the Seahawks and the Eagles. You see a lot of people are on the injury report. I tend to think most of these guys for both teams will play just because they're all questionable here. But you have Lockett, Dwayne Brown, Mike Upati, Clowney, Reed, Jefferson. Some key guys, but again, I think they'll play. Same with the Eagles. You have Jordan Howard, Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, Peters, and Lane Johnson. Both the tackles are banged up, and that's going to be a big deal, obviously. But let's dig in now to the key stats. And now these are in terms of yardage accumulations, and I like to put position group against their competition. So you see in the first row there, you see the Seattle Seahawks pass offense is ranked 10th in the league in yards accumulated versus the 17th ranked Eagles passing defense. Now the Eagles have the 24th passing offense versus the 28th passing defense for Seattle. So very interesting there. I would give probably the very slight advantage to Seattle there, but I was surprised to see how low the Seattle Seahawks are in terms of yards given up through the air. Then you look at the run offense versus run defense for the Eagles. I don't think there are any surprises there. Seattle likes to run, and Philadelphia is excellent at stopping the run. I think it's the strength of this Eagles team. Then you look at the run offense for the Eagles, their 11th, which I was surprised. I thought they would actually be lower, so good for the Eagles for being that high. I know they just added Ajayi back to their roster too. The Seattle Seahawks run defense is 12th. So in terms of advantages based on just these statistics, I got to say they're fairly even. Can Philadelphia take advantage of the 28th ranked passing defense? We'll see. That's going to be one of the keys, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, the key analytics, what these are, and what I call them better stats, is for people that bet professionally against the NFL. Although they look at a long list of things, they usually like to start with yards per play, key situational football, third and fourth down percentage, how often can you score a touchdown when you get into the red zone, and then what are your turnover and penalty yardage, okay? So it's basically how efficient is your offense, how good are they at staying on the field, and once they get all the way down to the end, can they punch it in the end zone, or are they taking field goals, okay? So let's compare the Seattle Seahawks versus the Philadelphia Eagles here. Seattle gets 5.9 yards per play. That's pretty good, but the Eagles defense is, fairly strong there at only giving up 5.3 yards per play. On the other side, the offensively, Philadelphia gains 5.1 yards per play. So if you look at their offense versus defense, they're actually at a minus net 0.2 yards. That's not so great. Seattle, though, they give up 5.9, so they're at a net 0. They give up as many as they gain. Neither of these teams has a particularly strong metric on either of these stats. You give the slight advantage, I think, to the, and I mean very slight advantage to Seattle there just based on averages. You look at third down conversion and fourth down conversion. I got to say they're pretty darn similar. Seattle gains a little bit. It gains a little bit less third downs. Philadelphia is a little bit better on third downs. And then the same is true, I think, on defensively. The Seattle gives up a little bit less, but Philadelphia is pretty good there. So both teams, I think, are sound on third downs. I wouldn't give really an advantage. They're pretty close in there, in my opinion. Fourth down is very I guess it goes more towards Seattle at this point. They gain more in fourth downs. They convert half. Philadelphia gives up more than half in terms of conversions there. So you give the slight advantage. Basically, if a team is playing from behind in the fourth quarter, can they stay on the field? Seattle's a little bit better at that than Philadelphia is at this point in the season. Then you look at red zone percentage. Seattle scores a touchdown more than 2/3 of the time when they get in the red zone there. Philadelphia scores 62% of the time, so no slouches by any means, but just not quite as good as Seattle. And then Seattle's defense is a little bit better than Philadelphia's. So again, by the tiniest of hairs here, I give the advantage probably there to Seattle. Turnover margin, obviously Seattle, they're in plus 0.6, whereas Philadelphia is minus 0.2. I don't think it's an egregious difference, but it is one worth noting. And then you see penalty yards is pretty darn close there. So let's look at the path to victory before we get to the fantasy football projections for each team. Look, the strength of this Philadelphia Eagles defense is their run defense, but the strength of the Seattle Seahawks offense, although they have Russell Wilson, who is probably number 2 at this point in my MVP race behind Lamar Jackson at this point, Russell Wilson is very, very good. I think though that Seattle's going to have to get this run game established, and they will work to do that. They're very patient with it. I do think that Seattle will run, and they need to just stick with it, even if they're not getting results early. I don't think they need to go straight to the pass game, but if they do, Philly's pass defense, they've improved as of late. They started the year slow. In the last 3 or 4 games, they've actually been playing pretty well. But here's the thing, with Josh Gordon on this team coming off a bye week, he's going to be a little bit more integrated into the offensive system. We know that Philadelphia, we've seen them earlier in the season. Certainly Stephon Diggs kind of torched them earlier in the year. Can they deal with 2 deep threats at a time? Can they deal with Lockett and Gordon both running deep at the same time? I don't know. Seattle doesn't know. Philadelphia doesn't know, but I hope we all find out. I think Seattle needs to test the top of this defense, see if they can go over the top, and they have the skill players to do that. And also, don't forget about DK Metcalf, okay? I don't know, where the depth chart and where the snap counts are going to go. I don't know if basically DK Metcalf becomes the 3rd receiver in this offense, but he was coming on quite well. The Seattle Seahawks have some weapons in the passing game. Not only Russell Wilson, it's not just him buying time and throwing deep anymore to Doug Baldwin. They have legit players at wide receiver that can make things happen for themselves. It's going to be interesting, okay? The Eagles, they're going to need both tight ends. The book on Zach Ertz this year is just to play physical with him, try to bully him early in the game, take him out of his game. Now, Dallas Goedert, you can't do that to, in my opinion, and I think Dallas Goedert is showing himself as kind of the tougher of the 2 tight ends in the red zone as well. But Zach Ertz projects to have a very, very nice game. Seattle needs to limit him. That's a key for Seattle. They need to limit Zach Ertz in this game. The analytics are very, very close, as I mentioned before. Seattle just needs to take care of the ball. I think they're the stronger team. They're playing in Philly, and I know Philly is actually favored by 1.5 points here, but I think Seattle's the stronger team. They just need to avoid mistakes. And then Philadelphia, they will give up. If you're looking, in play charting and where this deficiency is for Philadelphia, I think they do give up some yards in the screen game. I think Rashaad Penny could be a factor, but really I think it's more about, can Seattle stay patient with the run, and can they test over the top with Gordon and Lockett? I think that will do very well for Seattle and Seattle fans. Now for Philadelphia, the path to victory, okay? Make Seattle one-dimensional. It's about that run game for me, right? This is what Philadelphia has been able to do all season long. Make them one-dimensional as early as possible. Nelson Agholor, assuming he plays, he needs to catch the ball. He's been way too inconsistent in his career. He's got too much potential. They need Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Agholor to both be factors in this game, so he needs to have himself a game. This is the type of matchup where he can do well, so he needs to do well. Find a deep weapon. Take deep shots. Alshon Jeffrey seems to be having a little bit of problem creating separation. I don't really even care about that. Just run him deep. Show the willingness to throw and take shots deep. If it's not him, put in some of your other guys there. Just find somebody to try to blow the top. Find some speed on the field and take shots. I don't care if they catch him or not. Just take the shots. It will have an effect and basically create more space earlier, or I should say closer to the line of scrimmage. Let's see. Alshon Jeffrey, I mentioned. Analytically speaking, he could have a big game. He's in line to have a big game today. Or this weekend. He needs to have a big game. And then Philadelphia, I think they need to steal possession in this game, whether it's going for it on 4th down in the red zone, not settling for a field goal, but being a little bit more aggressive. I think they do need to push the issue a little bit. And, something that's not captured in these analytics is that this game is super important really for both teams. Let's just say that Seattle loses, okay? Seattle loses, they could potentially fall 2 games behind San Francisco going into Week 13. That's not good. Even though that they beat San Francisco, 2 weeks ago or whatever it was, they can't fall 2 games behind, okay? I know they'll have 1 game left against them, but it's a huge game. And then for Philadelphia, if you lose this game, the wild card, you're already kind of losing that, right? But Philadelphia is a competitor for wild card if they can't beat Dallas. This is a big game for playoffs. just in having that tiebreaker. And then on top of that, you can't really go down. Now, Dallas has a really tough game against New England this week. Maybe they could afford to lose, but I think it's kind of backs against their wall situation. I said this when Philadelphia played Buffalo a few weeks ago. It's a big game, and when Philadelphia, plays in big games, kind of gotta have it games. I don't know that this is necessarily gotta have it yet, but it's damn close. Philadelphia is really good in these situations. I think it's going to be a playoff-like atmosphere. I think Philadelphia will come out with intensity. So this line, although, if this was on a neutral field on any given Sunday, maybe early in the season, I would take Seattle. Just the need for Philadelphia to win and their ability to make things happen in those types of situations, it gives me pause betting. Okay, I'm going to probably remove this from my board because I do like Seattle, like I said, analytically speaking, but Philadelphia, they reach another level when they feel like their backs are against the wall. Let's conclude this video now with fantasy football projections for both teams. RoccoBot is my fantasy football algorithm that I wrote to spit out and help me make, emphasis on help me make decisions on my fantasy football roster and daily fantasy. But let's take a look here. I think Russell Wilson has a nice day passing. I do think he'll escape the pocket and get you maybe one of those types of games where he gets like 50 to 80 yards on the ground too. Philadelphia's run defense is so good that they're going to really need to keep him honest. I do think I would like to see them, call some designed runs, and Russell Wilson's really good at sliding and not getting hit, so I feel pretty safe about that too. Okay, so I think Russell Wilson has himself a nice game. I think Carson is a start. Potentially could get in the end zone there. I think that he's more likely than not to get in the end zone. I mentioned Rashaad Penny has an opportunity in the screen game. I'd like to see him used, and I'd like to see him beat this projection. I think he has a chance to, but I wouldn't rotate him in my daily fantasy or my fantasy football lineups. Tyler Lockett and I have Josh Gordon there as a low projection. I really want to see him line up on the other side of the field opposite Lockett and just run him deep. I can't wait to watch this game to see what they do with Josh Gordon, but I'd love to see that. I mentioned DK Metcalf. Don't forget about him by any means. If Gordon wasn't here, I would have a huge projection on Metcalf. But as it stands, it's really to me about snap count. And how that these personnel are going to be used this week. I don't know how Josh Gordon is going to affect the targets for DK Metcalf. We don't know that because we don't have a big book of knowledge on that yet. I do like him, but I think it's a risk to play him, and I do think it's a risk to play Gordon at this point too because we need to see how they're going to be used. Now, if you're a believer that Gordon's just going to be used the entire game, then go ahead and play him. I think you'd be safe in doing that. For me, I think it's too risky to play him either in my fantasy football or daily fantasy football lineup, so I'm going to just kind of punt on that one. And then Jacob Hollister, I like him this week. I don't know if he'll get in the end zone, but I think he'll get you the catches and yards that will warrant a start. Defense and special teams, I do like Seattle as a start-worthy team this week. They're not my favorite defense, but that 7.0, that's a pretty good projection for what RoccoBot spits out. That's generally in the top third of defenses, so I think you're fine there. Now for Philadelphia, fantasy football-wise, Carson Wentz is a fringe start. I don't love him this week, and it's because I want to see more from the Philadelphia wide receivers. It's hard for a fantasy football quarterback to excel when he's so reliant on two tight ends to move the ball. We saw it on Thursday Night Football with Jacoby Brissett needing Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron. When your receivers are banged up and when they can't create separation specifically downfield, it's just tough. It just is. The NFL is hard. Jordan Howard, I like him. I think he'll have a great game. However, you have to figure out, Doug Peterson likes to rotate these backs in. They have Ajayi. Is he going to eat into Howard's snaps? I don't know. Same thing I was talking about before with DK Metcalf and Josh Gordon and Howard, the snap counts, how are the touches going to be distributed? I have the same kind of concerns with Jordan Howard and Ajayi and Miles Sanders. On this team, I think Miles Sanders is the best running back, but you got to think about how these players are being used. In the game, I like them, and I think they'll be able to get yards. For fantasy, they're just a little bit too risky. I want more information before I put them in daily fantasy or fantasy football. That's my opinion. If I had to pick, I do think Jordan Howard can have a nice game if they stick with him. So you have to know, you have to basically guess what Doug Peterson's going to do. Is it going to be Howard? Is it going to be somebody else? But I think that up the middle running attack is going to be good, and my money's on Howard if I was going to bet on one of those guys. Now, Alshon Jeffrey, like I said, I think he will have himself a nice game. I think he will get in the end zone. Nelson Aguilar has to step up. He needs to beat this projection if Philadelphia is going to win. Zach Ertz, I mentioned, I think he's going to have a huge game. I didn't even use a third Philadelphia wide receiver. I think Dallas Goedert will beat this projection. I think he's going to go over 10. I think he's a very good bet to get in the end zone. And then Philadelphia's defense, although I think they're a strong unit, I don't like them against the Seattle Seahawks in this matchup. I have them as a 5.3. That is a sit for the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Like I said, I am very high on them generally. I just don't like them in this matchup. So there you go. That takes me through the game plan. If you like this series, I do a few games every week. I have the Baltimore Rams game out. I have a few others. I did the Colts and the Houston Texans. I did pretty well there, analytically speaking. So just check us out. Also, fantasy football, we do a lot of stuff. Check out our channel. Check out our Week 12 playlist, which is updated daily. Once again, please like and subscribe. If you're a fan of either team, or you think you're just a fan of the NFL and you think I'm missing the mark somewhere, just comment. Let's have a talk about it. I'd love to get your opinion. And once again, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on another episode soon.